We are wrapping up the very end of Section 4, Louis's Wars, in our Age of Absolutism chapter. So if you will make sure that you are finishing up the information using this part of the typed outline. All four of Louis's wars that were fought will have a negative effect or impact on France for years to come. So let's start on your number 9 with Louis's costly wars broke the French treasury. Not only was a lot of money spent on war, but also on that beautiful Palace of Versailles that we went over days ago. So definitely make sure you know, if you're asked about what was all the money spent on, it wasn't just the 4 wars, it was also the years that it took to build Versailles as well as maintain it once it's built. You know, you got to keep up all the gardens and everything else within that home, and that cost a lot of money. Seeds of revolution are planted in France. Whenever you have financial problems, that is going to cause some unrest. So when it says seeds of revolution are being planted, that just means there's kind of some groundwork being laid for possibly a revolution in the future. Here's why. Peasants are not happy because with France in a financial hole, they're being taxed more than ever. And so this is just further angering the peasants. They were already being taxed before these wars, but now, they're taxed even more. Other than the peasants, who else is angry at this time? The bourgeoisie. Remember, this is your middle class in France. The reason they are angry is they also are paying taxes. They don't feel like they should be. They also cannot get some of the better jobs because those jobs are being given to nobles, especially the nobles who are proving to be loyal to the king. So the nobles are getting like the best positions. The bourgeoisie also feels like they don't have any power in France, no say-so when it comes to decisions being made. And y'all, this is a very intellectual group of people. They are very well educated, but yet the king is absolute and does not take any advice from these very well educated people. So they just want their voice heard. They want to feel like they have a say in the decisions that are being made for France. And that's not what's happening at this time. We also know that Louis XIV's heirs, which means, the people that come after him, which in this case is going to be another Louis XV, will inherit these economic problems. All the debt that France has will be inherited by those who come after Louis XIV. And unfortunately, if those kings that come after Louis XIV, if they cannot put in programs to deal with these financial problems, then yes, France could be on the path and will be on the path to a possible revolution breaking out. Because again, people can take only so much. In 1715, at the age of 76 years old, Louis XIV died. Now, he knew that he didn't have much time left because he was getting up in age. As you can see, y'all, living to be 76 years old in the 1700s is unheard of. He obviously had some of the best medical doctors helping him, live a longer life, because otherwise, people usually did not live that long back in the 1700s. I think the average age was probably about 40 years old. So he lived well beyond what most people did at this time of history. Like I was mentioning, he knew that he didn't have much time left because he was getting up in age. He was very sick at the end of his life. And as he lay on his deathbed, he starts reflecting a lot about his life. And often people do that when they know they don't have much time left. And the one thing that he regrets that he did during his life was fighting war. The fact that he liked war so much, and he did because of the money. And he regrets this now, seeing what it has done financially to France. So he did realize how much money was being spent, and he regret the fact that so much money was being spent because of the fact that he liked war and trying to prove to people that France could definitely be very powerful. So unfortunately, can't take anything back. What's done is done. And he clearly outlived all of the children that he had. So they're going to have to go to another relative down the family tree in order to rule France after him. And like I told you, that happens to be another Louis, and he will get the title Louis the 15th. We don't really go over much about him because there's not a whole lot to really, talk about with him. But the next time we take a look at French kings, France will be on the verge of revolution. So I am just going to let you know that things are not going to improve, and they are just going to get worse. That wraps up the material for Louis's Wars on Roman numeral 4. And next, we are going to move to go over England when it comes to absolutism. So as far as typed outlines go, you're going to use this one, or at least start using this one for Roman numeral 5. So again, make sure that you have this information handy as you are taking notes. So we're going to begin with England in 1603 when Elizabeth I died. She was the last Tudor to rule England. The Tudors were the dynasty that was in charge of England for a number of years. And so she is what we call the Virgin Queen. She never got married. She never had children. So when she died, they had to go to, of course, her nearest relative, who was in Scotland. And he was ruling Scotland at the time. He was James VI. But now that Elizabeth has died, we have an opportunity for James to also rule England. Okay? But since there's never been a James in England to rule, he will get the title James I. So if you've ever wondered, how do they get those Roman numerals? That's how they do it. Okay? So in Scotland, there had been 3 other James to rule. So when he became the King of Scotland, James IV, I'm messing up my Roman numerals. There had been 5 other James that ruled Scotland before him. So when he became king, he was given the title James VI. Well, in England, no James have ruled, so he is James I. Now, this is the Stuart family. So make sure you know we went from Tudors under Elizabeth and her siblings to now the Stuarts. And yes, the Stuarts are ruling both England and Scotland. We can see here that James I will not be very popular in England. One of those reasons, he's going to try to be an absolute ruler, and we already know that Parliament in particular is not going to stand for this. So other than them, butting heads over power, they're also going to clash over money. Okay, so money and the role of government. Again, that deals with the power. Parliament's basically saying, we have always helped the kings of England rule and make decisions. And so we are trying to preserve that tradition. And here comes James I, who wants to change that and be an absolute king, where he holds all the power. And when it comes to money, we know that Parliament has always had to approve when a king wants to raise taxes on the people of England. But again, here comes James, who's saying, I should be able to raise taxes whenever I want. So again, you can see the issues that are going to be in place between Parliament and James the First. Also not popular with the people of England are the king's advisors. Now this should be on your number 4. One in particular, it says especially the Duke of Buckingham. Now that's his title, but his real name is George Villiers. So just make sure if you see George Villiers, you know that that is the Duke of Buckingham. Now I will accept on a quiz either name if I have a question. I'll accept Duke of Buckingham or I'll accept George Villiers. So either one should be fine. Buckingham was basically born a commoner. He was not of the nobility, but he will be promoted or elevated to the Duke status by the king. You see, in order to have the title of a Duke, you have to be the king's brother. And George Villiers was not the king's brother. He was not related to James I at all. But the reason that he got this title of being a Duke is because James and George had a romantic relationship. They were very open about it. They weren't going to hide it. And y'all, this was not unheard of at this time for the king to have relations with both men and female. But there were people who absolutely was against this idea. So as you can see here, that goes back to the king's advisors not being popular. It's also worth mentioning that James I was married, so he did have a wife and kids, but yet he still had this very open relationship with the Duke of Buckingham. Also not liked is Archbishop Laud. The reason he was not liked, and you need to write this down on your 4A, it's not on the PowerPoint, so write down exactly what I'm saying. He was trying to force his religious beliefs. He was trying to force his religious beliefs, which is Protestant. Remember, we've got the Anglican Church in England, okay? Protestant, on both the people of England and Scotland. So let me repeat that. He tried to force his religious beliefs, which are Protestant, okay, you might want to put in parentheses, Anglican Church, on both the people of England and Scotland. So the problem is, not everybody wants to follow the Anglican Church, which is very Protestant. Some people want to practice Catholicism and be Catholic, especially Scotland. There were a lot of people who were Catholic there. They're also Protestants, okay? But the point I'm trying to make is nobody wants to be forced to believe a certain religion. And Archbishop Laud is basically doing this on behalf of the king, because the king's saying, I am absolute, and so therefore you are going to practice my faith, which was Protestant. A specific group of Protestants known as the Puritans, remember we've gone over them before, are upset with the fact that bishops have power to make decisions in the Anglican Church. And according to the Puritans, this is way too similar to what the Catholics do. And so they are wanting bishops to basically not be part of these decisions in the Anglican Church. Well, the response that James had to these Puritans was the quote, no bishop, no king. So basically what he's saying is, if I get rid of the bishops, then I know you're going to try to get rid of the king next. So he said, we're keeping the bishops. They're staying whether you like it or not.